Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into a firearm that's made quite a splash, the CZ Scorpion.
That's right. It's definitely got people talking.
And you, our listener, you're probably looking for the real story, right? A good understanding without, having to dig through tons of technical jargon.
Exactly. Cut through the noise.
So our mission, if you will, is pretty straightforward today. We want to dissect the hype, give you a balanced, unbiased look at the CZ Scorpion, strengths, weaknesses, the whole picture.
And we've pulled this from, well, a lot of hands-on reviews, user feedback. It's all based on what people are actually experiencing out there.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of feedback, and it's interesting how the same points, good and bad, keep popping up.
It really is. This firearm, it seems to provoke strong opinions, definitely. We're here to unpack why.
Okay, sounds good. Let's kick things off with the positives. What makes the Scorpion stand out? First up, I see modern ergonomics and design.
Yeah, that's a big one. Consistently, people point to how user-friendly it feels. The controls.
Ambidextrous, right.
Exactly. The charging handle, mag release, truly ambi, which is great, makes it really suitable whether you're right or left-handed. Several sources specifically mention that ease of use.
That is a plus. And, okay, putting rounds on target, how does it fare with sights and accuracy?
Generally gets high marks there, too, especially,
Yeah.
With the typical ranges for a pistol caliber carbine.
Like inside 50 yards or so?
Precisely. The sights themselves are these robust metal ones, multiple apertures. People seem to really like them. And yeah, for a 9mm, the accuracy is often described as, well, impressive.
And that's partly down to the barrel, I read. Cold hammer forged.
Yeah, that's what gets mentioned, yeah. That process usually means a stronger, more precise barrel, and it translates apparently to users getting tight groups, even headshots on silhouettes up close.
Okay, accuracy is good. But features don't mean much if it doesn't run, right? How's the reliability?
Yeah, this is another area where the Scorpion really shines, according to most reports.
In simple design.
Pretty much. It uses a simple blowback system.
Yeah.
Now, that does have implications for recoil, which we'll probably get to.
Uh-huh.
But the upside is, it's inherently reliable. Fewer moving parts compared to some other systems. Less to go wrong.
Makes sense.
And numerous reports just emphasize how dependable it is long-term. One reviewer even said it ticks like a clock. You hear that kind of thing repeatedly, it tells you something.
That's definitely reassuring. Okay, let's talk money. Always a factor. Where does the Scorpion sit, price-wise? Affordability.
Well, compared to some other PCCs out there, it's generally seen as relatively affordable. Not cheap, maybe, but good value for what you get.
And that extends to mags and accessories, too.
Yeah, they're usually reasonably priced as well, which, ties into the whole ecosystem. There's this huge aftermarket for the Scorpion. Lots of ways to customize it.
Right, so that combination of affordability and aftermarket support makes it attractive.
Definitely. It opens it up to a lot of shooters.
And the last point here in the pro column, it just seems like people genuinely have fun shooting it.
Oh yeah, that comes through loud and clear. It's just enjoyable. The recoil is manageable. It's easy to control.
So good for just blinking at the range.
For sure. Widely described as fun for recreational shooting, but folks also see it as practical for home defense. You can get rapid, accurate shots off pretty easily.
That mix of fun and function is definitely appealing.
Absolutely. A significant draw.
Okay, so clearly a lot going for it. But like we said, no firearm is perfect. Let's dive into some of the downsides, the weaknesses people mention. First one takes us back to ergonomics, but the safety selector.
Yes. This is probably the most common complaint you hear. While the overall feel is good, that specific part, the safety lever.
What's the issue? Just awkward.
It's more than awkward for some. It's the angle, apparently. It's designed to be ambi, which is good in theory, but the shape of it often digs into the shooter's trigger finger or hand, especially with a high grip.
Ouch, like actually painful.
Can be, yeah. Especially over longer shooting sessions. It's such a common issue that, like you mentioned earlier with aftermarket, tons of people swap out that factory safety.
Right. Okay, so that's one ergonomic hiccup. What else? Trigger pull.
The trigger, yeah. That's another frequent flyer on the complaints list.
Heavy. Mushy. What's the verdict?
Generally described as heavy, yeah. Some measure it around, 8.5 pounds? And also, spongy is a word that comes up a lot.
Not great for precise shots then.
It can definitely make it more challenging, yeah. People do say the reset is tactile. You can feel it click. But the overall pull weight and feel, it's a letdown for many.
Interesting. Now, wait, earlier we talked about low recoil being a positive, but recoil is also looked as a weakness, specifically recoil for a 9mm PCC. What's going on there?
Yeah, it sounds contradictory, doesn't it? It's about expectations, really.
Okay.
So while the recoil isn't like heavy overall, that straight blowback system we mentioned, it tends to result in more felt recoil than people expect from a 9mm carbine.
More than, say, a gas-operated system.
Generally, yes. Someone even compared the feel to a 5.56 rifle. Now, obviously, it doesn't have the power or range of a 5.56.
Right, of course.
But that sharp impulse from the heavy bolt cycling back in that relatively light polymer frame, it surprises some people. So manageable, yes, but maybe punchier than you'd think for 9mm.
Gotcha. And speaking of that polymer frame,
Yeah.
you mentioned some people were initially hesitant about all that plastic.
Yeah, there was definitely some maybe skepticism early on. Shooters used to all metal guns wondering about long-term durability.
But how has it actually held up?
Seems like, well, based on real-world use, the reports we've seen suggest the polymer is actually quite tough. Holds up to hard use, different conditions. So those initial worries seem mostly unfounded.
Okay. What about customization limitations? You said there's a big aftermarket, but it's listed as a weakness too.
Right. Another slight contradiction, but it's about types of customization.
How so?
Well, it has plenty of Picatinny rail space, right?
Yeah.
Top rail for optics, side rails. But what it doesn't have, typically, is MLOK slots on the handguard.
Ah, okay. And MLOK is becoming super popular for direct attaching accessories.
Exactly. It's often lighter, more streamlined. So compared to some newer PCCs designed with MLOK from the ground up, the Scorpion is maybe a bit less versatile in that specific way. You're kind of stuck with Picatinny adapters for some things.
Makes sense. Any other limitations?
Well, there were some mentions of proprietary bits on early models, magazines, trigger pack issues, but that seems to be mostly ironed out in the newer generations, like the EVO 3+.
Okay, good to know. And finally, value. We said it's relatively affordable, but
Yeah.
still a potential downside.
Yeah, it's all relative, isn't it?
Mm.
Well, it might be cheaper than, say, an MPX or a B&T. It's still a decent chunk of change for essentially a 9mm of the carbine.
So for someone purely focused on budget,
For someone purely focused on budget, they might feel there are, other 9mm carbines out there, maybe less flashy, that offer better bang for the buck, so to speak. It depends on what you value.
okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground. Let's try and maybe summarize the trade-offs here. We've got modern ergonomics generally, but that safety selector is a real sticking point for many.
Right. And then you have excellent sights, good accuracy for the platform, but paired with a heavy, kind of spongy trigger out of the box.
Then there's the reliable blowback action, which is great, but it does mean a bit more felt recoil than you might expect from a 9mm.
Exactly. And affordable mags and accessories, lots of aftermarket support, which is a huge plus. But then the gun itself is mostly polymer, which worried some initially and maybe lacks MLOK flexibility.
And finally, it's widely seen as fun, controllable, shootable. But the price point, while competitive in some ways, still makes some people question the overall value compared to all 9mm options.
Yeah, that sums up the balancing act pretty well, I think. Those are the core things to weigh up.
So the big question then, all this hype around the Scorpion, is it deserved? Has it earned its popularity?
Based on everything we've looked at, I'd say largely yes. The popularity seems pretty justified.
Because of that blend. Design, reliability, fun factor.
Exactly. That combination is really compelling for a lot of people in the PCC market. It hits a sweet spot. But, and this is important, you absolutely have to go in knowing about those shortcomings, especially the safety and the trigger. They're not deal breakers for everyone, clearly, but you need to be aware.
So it sounds like it's a great gun if you're willing to maybe tweak it a bit.
That's often the case, yeah. For people willing to maybe spend a little extra on an aftermarket safety or maybe a trigger upgrade, the Scorpion really seems to deliver excellent performance and enjoyment for the cost.
Okay, so final analysis. Worth the hype.
I'd say ultimately, yeah, it's a solid performer. It
Yeah.
mostly earns its reputation, especially if you're looking for something reliable, customizable, and fun in a PCC package. Just go in with your eyes open about the quirks.
Right. Manage those expectations regarding the safety and trigger, and maybe budget for upgrades if those things bother you. Okay, so wrapping up our deep dive here. The CZ Scorpion. It offers a really interesting mix. Modern looks, proven reliability, lots of fun on the range, big checks there.
Definitely.
But potential buyers, you absolutely need to be aware of those common complaints.
Yeah.
The safety selector digging in, And that heavy factory trigger.
Yeah, those are the main caveats. Which actually brings up kind of an interesting final thought for you, the listener, to chew on.
Oh,
Well, think about this mix, right? The clear strengths, the acknowledged weaknesses, and the fact that so many people do modify it with aftermarket parts. What does the Scorpion, as a case study, really tell us about firearm design in general? Those inherent trade-offs you often see.
like balancing cost versus features
Yeah,
or reliability versus refinement.
exactly.
Uh,
And maybe even more fundamentally, how much does the success of something like the Scorpion highlight the role of user preference? How subjective the idea of value really is when it comes to picking a firearm? Something to think about.